Back again, and welcome back to video number 2 in this little app reboot series that we're putting together. So, the last video we did our composer stuff where we add our packages that we sync from our GitHub account. We've created a new project called YouTube project, but I quickly actually wanted to go over these directory so we can see what is in them, because I didn't think I did that in the last video. As I'm saying, I want this to be as detailed as possible because I want you to understand exactly what I'm doing and exactly how we go about using this little mini framework that we've put together over the past few months. So you can see how we use the components that we've built. We've built these components to actually structure and build a small application, right? So within the public directory, you can see that we've got an ht access, and this is our main ht access file. This is the file that takes that request and call up our index file, which handles dispatching routes and starting up our application and stuff like that. So I'm going to quickly run through, well, not run through it, just quickly show you the ht access file. This is the bit that's calling up our index file that's going to be handling dispatching those requests coming in, right? Just got a bunch of different other stuff in there as well, but the main part that we're talking about is this bit, and mostly the index .php file that's handling all those requests. So, and this is the file. Let me close this down a bit. And this is the file, like our bootstrap file. This is what's going to be part of every package that we've created, or part of every project that we created from that package. We're going to be having this index bootstrap file, which is going to be the gateway into our application, right? So I just want to quickly go over it, and I can already see some stuff that I didn't do in the last video, but we've just created this package. We've just put it on packages, so I'm expecting some errors, I'm expecting some bugs, expecting some stuff that I don't want to be in it. And I can already see that we've got the Symfony debug, because we took that out from our composer file in the last video, so we're no longer using that because we've actually built our own error handling component, which is going to do that for us. It's not as specky as the Symfony one, but it's going to do the job for us, right? So what we've got right here, we've just got some constants that we've defined that's going to provide some path for different directories that we need to keep in the root directory, right? And this is basically what this bit is. And second line down, we got our composer. So we're bringing our composer autoload within our main bootstrap directory, which means that we can use composer in any part of our application because it's in the main bootstrap file, right? And we're bringing in some of our component file. We've got our YAML file, we've got our base application, and we've got our log level classes. And it's essentially dependencies for our base application class, which relies on stuff like all of our YAML configurations that we're going to be that you can see is being passed in. So we got a lot of YAML file that's being passed into these methods, and these YAML files basically contains most of the system configurations, which is also going to be a directory that comes as part of the package, a predefined directory with all these predefined configurations, right? So we got the set path, which is taking this path constants that we've defined at the top. That's going to define the main directory path, and that's going to provide access for all of our other constants to actually use that to define their own path into their own directory, right? So we got our main config, which is taking in the entire app YAML file, and internally it's going to use the different bits within that YAML file to pass it down to other methods and other components that that relies on some of these configurations. And this is where we got our set error handling. That's also taking some information from our app YAML, but in this case, it's got its own error handling section or error handling array, which got its own key value pairs, right? Also, our session, we define that out in our Bootstrap. Cookies, cache, we got our routes, we got our logger, that set logger as well, so we can log exception, etc. And we also got this set container providers, and this is part of our dependency injection, right? But don't worry about all of this, because I will go through all of these bit by bit. So let's open back our project sidebar. So that's our Bootstrap index file, and it's going to be the gateway into our application, right? So you can see also our composer file. We also auto loading, if I can find it, that's the lock. Composer file, you can see we also auto loading the PSR4 standard to our point to our app directory, which is going to be this directory, which is a directory that all of our app subdirectory is going to be in, like etc, like our controllers or models or entities, schema, all of our template files is going to be within that app directory. And our PSR4 auto loading is pointing straight to that directory, which means we can namespace our classes, which is going to make importing stuff a hell of a lot easy. Now, it's also good to know that this is not procedural coding. There's no procedural coding in this entire application. It's complete OOP. So just to let you be aware of that, there's nothing procedural about anything that we're going to be doing. Everything is object orientated, right? So let's close those two files. What else? We got our Git Ignore file, and the Git Ignore file is a file that GitHub looks at to see what directory we don't want pushing to our public repository, because obviously we've got information that can be sensitive that we've got in our .env file, contains of our environmental configuration, like our database access, or might even have API keys in there as well. So we've detail all the stuff that we don't want pushing to GitHub, and that is going to be within that Git Ignore file. Again, we got this config directory, and this contains most of the application config that the Bootstrap or index Bootstrap file was looking for, and it's going to take in some of these configuration, pass it down to other components that requires some of these configurations to actually do its job. Right, I will actually be setting up a website as well, because as I'm saying, this is something that I want to be pushing to be production ready. So I am going to have a website, and I'm going to be having tons of documentation on everything that's going on here. So, but I will go through these as we're building the application, because it makes no sense doing that right now. So when we start going through the application, we're going to be visiting these config files, and we're going to be seeing what they're doing and how we can manipulate them to get a result. And again, this is all what they're doing. You can see we got assets, which is how I'm loading my assets to my front end or my back end application as well, using this YAML file. So I've defined a style sheet array, and within that array I've got all these key value pairs, right, that define different style sheets, whether that's going to be internal style sheets or from a CDN, and same for the scripts as well. So that's how I'm loading assets within this application. So we've got our cache YAML. A lot of these would not make sense until we start actually building the application. We've got stuff like events, and I should actually delete these as well, because these is part of the old application, and I want to actually go through these with you step by step, so you know exactly how to set these up. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to leave one as an example, but I'm going to comment it out. Local. So this is how I'm doing some translation within my view templates. So we define key value pairs again. You can see I've got the main key as EN, which is English. We can define different locale within this file. For example, we could have at the bottom, we could say something like FR colon, and we could define these local same keys but in the French language, right? And our template file will see these, and depending on what language we're using on the front end or the back end, it will switch based on what we've got defined within this file. So this is how I'm loading in, I'm converting my locales within my view template by using these keys to display the English or French or whatever. So we got the menu. We're no longer using this. As of yesterday, I've actually built a menu component which looks at all the controller files that we've got, and based on the flags that we've set, we can automatically create menu item from those controller and push it to the database. And I'm doing that through event dispatching, so it's not even something we're doing, it's something that's being done automatically in the background for us. But we will get into that once we get to that stage. So I can actually delete this file. And providers, and this is where we've defined all of our dependencies. This is all the components that we've injected into our container, and we can access these properties because the key becomes a property, like request, response. We can use those keys to get the object, and we can get this from any of our controller files, right? So this is what the providers YAML file is all of our dependencies that we're injecting into our container that we can use. Is available for us within our controller classes and also within our action method. We can call these within our action method. So that's what that is. Our routes is where we define all of our routes. We got front-end routes which we can define. We got back-end route which is dynamic. So we do stuff like passing in dynamic values, and they will change based on the route that or the controllers that we've created for a backend with a particular namespace like admin. Now every controller classes that uses an admin namespace will be dynamically created for us. So we can actually get rid of all of these because I want to go over these with you bit by bit so you know exactly how they work. So we're going to be leaving ourselves with this one route, which is our home route, right? And client directory and template directory is also something that I've completely forgotten what they are, but I think it's something to do with the templating engine that I've created as well. It's just so if we want to change the directory name, we can do it from right here. I think this is what these two keys are, but again we will get into that later on when we get to that point. So let's close that down. Session, this handles our session. This is all where all the session configurations are in this config file. And you can see what I've done also is I've got different drivers which we can select, and by default we're using the native storage driver, which is storing sessions in file by default. That's what PHP does. But we've got different drivers that we can use, like array session storage, or even putting our session into our database and persisting it from there. So if we want to select a different driver, it's as simple as getting the name of the driver that we want, copying it, pasting it right there, and setting the default flag to true, and then setting the default driver flag to false because we're now using a different driver. So we're going to leave it as it is, using native storage. Later on we can change it if we want. We can change our session name to your own application name. You can do that, and we could fiddle around with these little settings, but we'll leave it as it is, right? And our template is just a small configuration for our template in Engine. It does stuff like define the extension for our files. We also got a small built-in caching which I've set to false on the development, so it speeds up what I'm doing. But in production, you can turn that to true, and that will cache all your files for you and try and give it some performance increase. So that's what the configuration files are. So we got a bin directory as well, which contains our console file, and within the core framework, I've also got some commands that we're going to be using later on to generate modules for us, controllers for us, forms, stuff like that. So, but that's a bit more advanced. I actually want to go through the basics of how we create these stuff before we start automating it, so we can see how we do it manually before we start using commands to do it for us. So that's what that is, right? And we've got our vendor directory, which contains all of our external dependencies through Composer, etc., etc. So I'm going to actually switch my screen. I'm going to show you a visual representation of what we're going to be working on over the next few videos, right? So if I go to this scene, I'm going to load up my localhost and go on there. So this is the application that we're going to be recreating, and you can see we've landed on the home page, which is what you're seeing. With get this back up, which is what you're seeing from our YAML file or route. That's our home page. That's the page that we've just landed on, right? Now I've just deleted these stuff. Let's just get them back for a minute, so I can show you the index page on the registration page, which we're going to be creating. So let's close that down for a bit. Close you down. Switch to a scene again. So this is the home page. This is going to be the landing page. It's going to be the first thing that we tackle. Like the first controller we're going to be building is this home controller, and I want you to see how simple it is to actually get a route ready and a view so you can see what's going on. And then we're going to go on to stuff like signing in. If I can find my pointer. Sorry, I'm using two different screens there, and it's not a great experience at the minute, but persevering. So signing in is our login page. We're going to be creating this. The second part, we're going to be creating our security controller, which handles our login page or logout button, and we're going to be building our forms, not like using HTML. It's all object orientated the way we're going to be doing it. So we're going to be building a class that defines a form, and we're going to be passing variables to our template, which is going to display that form for us, right? Then we're going to go on to our registration controller. We're going to be building that out so we can register users to go into our database. Then we're going to look at stuff like our password recovery system, and that's also a separate controller on its own that's doing all password recovery. We're going to also look at the activation controller, which handles activating an account when we create a new user. It's going to send an activation hash to your email address. You're going to click it, and it's going to automatically change some fields in the database and set your status as active. All pretty basic stuff, right? So that's going to be the first 4 controllers that we're going to be creating and coding out, and I'm going to explain to you as we go along the different step ins and out, the 2 different ways that we can actually implement the logic, and dealing with the models, dealing with the forms, dealing with the validation, dealing with the view templates, etc., etc. So that's I just want to show you like a visual representation of an actual application that I've got that you can see on your screen right now. This is exactly what we're going to be building out. And you can see later on down in the video, we're going to be having, I've just logged in by the way, and you can see that it's now bringing up my name, email address, and we could do stuff like show your account details, and I'm just dumping an array of data to the screen so you can see the user, the permissions. And again, that's also something we're going to be building as well, a complete RB role-based access controller. It's already built in, but we're going to be implementing it to handle stuff like preventing access to certain routes, etc. And you can see we're going to be doing the fifth controller we're going to be building is our profile controller, which allows us to update our profile account, right? So we got stuff like email that we can change, and we can change our password. Let's go back, change stuff like our password, etc., etc. So that's going to be the 5 controllers that we're going to be building before we jump into the back end. But once you finish these controllers, then you got a good idea of how it works, because once you build one, then the process of building a next one is going to be the same, because that's how I coded it, that's how I built it. So once you get the idea of how you do one, then it's pretty much the same across the board for any controllers. So I can, it's also got an admin section, which I've also showed you in the past as well. It's pretty much what it looks like. This is a little bit more advanced because I've got it's not just your standard regular CRUD going on. We've got quite a lot of stuff going on in the background. We've got event login. We've got middleware going on. We've got a lot of event dispatching going on in the background, doing stuff that you're not really seeing, and it's recording stuff in the background that you're not seeing as well. So there's a little bit more logic involved with the basic CRUD, but this is something we're going to be tackling as well. Once we've finished all the front-end controllers, we're going to be diving into back-end and building a back-end for our system. And you can see we got all these menus, they're all automatically generated. So if I show you something real quick, let's go into my localhost. Let's get all of our menu item, which is what you're seeing in the dashboard. I'm going to delete them. And before that, actually, menus and menu item, these are all like a one-to-one relationship. So if I delete these, check it, delete it, you'll see that the menu item, they've also been deleted, right? So if I go back to the backend and I reload the page, you see all the menus, they've gone. And because I've reloaded on the dashboard page, right, it's quickly inserted that dashboard controller into the database. So if I go back there, reload, you can see we got dashboard back in our database. And if I go on to any sort of link, and this is the sort of like funky bit about this, because how do you get the other controllers on? Because it's the process is being done automatically. So we can click a link like users, and you can see the users link pops up. We can do another one, roles. The roles link pops up. So each time we click these link for the first time, it installs all the menu item into our database. So you see, I've just clicked on user. If I go back to the database, reload, you see we got our user. If I click on the menu item, you can see it's installed, or it's pushed a lot of information about the user controller to this menu item table. And you could verify the user's controller by this user prefix. So we've got user. So basically what it's doing is it's using PHP reflection, and it's actually taking all the protected route methods and inserting those into the database, because those are routes that we can actually visit, right? But I will get into that later on. And I said, you know, we did that, and we didn't actually do anything. This is all being done in the background while we're navigating around. But we got quite a lot of logic. That's mostly what I spend a lot of time writing, logic to do stuff in the background that we can't see, right? And while we're doing that, I can also visit the system log. Yeah, we're going to go to index for that. So the system log, this is where it's logging all those information, all those menu that's being created is being logged within this table. So the system log is going to be where we log everything to do with the system internally. This is not something you can add stuff to. It is something that just get recorded in the background based on certain actions that's being done, and you won't need to actually worry about it. It's just something that you can go and reference. If you've got some kind of issue, you could chase it back to, you know, what happened basically. But I will get into this in due time. But without further ado, we're not going to waste too much time in the background. We're going to start building out this application, and so you can see how that process works. See you in the next video.